Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive Western Suburbs podcast. This is Josh Welge, joined by Joel Boenitz on this lovely Tuesday afternoon. Joel, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I got a little eye infection, so I look a little weird compared to usual. And I know you probably look a little weird to a couple of people because you aren't wearing your glasses today. But besides that, everything else is doing pretty well.
Yeah, I'm just kind of weird. Sometimes I like to take the glasses off. Sometimes I like to take them on. It just kind of depends. So we're going to go without the glasses for now. But yeah, anyway, we're going to be talking a lot of good football. Joel, we saw some great football last Friday, some really huge games in our neck of the woods. I'm going to start with you. Batavia, Geneva. We were wondering last week if Geneva could finally end the run that Batavia's had on them for over a decade. And boy, did they. Man, was not expecting that final margin. How'd it happen?
It was just a crazy second half from Geneva, and that was, all they really needed. Before I get more into the details of the game, I first want to give an apology to the Geneva coaches because after the game was over, I actually got approached by a couple of the assistant coaches, and they told me that apparently my words from the preview and also from last week's show kind of motivated them into making sure that they definitely got it. They called me out specifically, so you got it right, folks. But no, the game was an absolute chess match, which was how Boone Thorgerson described how the game was possibly going to go, and that's exactly what ended up happening. That first half, it was so cutthroat, dare to say. If any team made a mistake, there was something getting into the end zone, and that's what happened. The first drive that Geneva made it into the red zone. It was 93 yards, ended with a touchdown from Talon Taylor. And then to end the first half, Batavia was able to work their way down the field and they pulled off a Philly special in order to get, that touchdown. But once the second half hit, Geneva just kept the momentum that they had with the people that came into Bulldog Stadium. They just took it and they just ran with it. Three touchdowns in the second half from Tony Chihino to Finnegan Wepner, really controlled it. Michael Romero basically dominated on the running offense. He ended up with, I think, 200 rushing yards for them. And it was just, Geneva wanted more in the end. And that's who came out on top to get their first win since 2010 in the rivalry.
Yeah, I mean, Geneva, everybody knew about Talon Taylor coming of the year, but they've really emerged as a team that's got so many weapons. Tony Chihino's just been kind of a revelation at quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the area. Finnegan Wepner keeps coming up big. Michael Romero, kind of knew about him going into the year as a good running back. The other thing, too, is, my goodness, their defense. Nobody has been able to stop Batavia's rushing game with Nathan Whitwell this year, and Geneva did. I mean, what do you have, like 15 yards rushing, 20 yards rushing? That's something craziness.
Officially on Max Preps, it was 34, but I had them for 26. So it was anywhere in that range. Either way, it was under 100 yards. Nobody's been able to do that this entire year. But Geneva put their foot down and was able to stop them. And on the other hand, got their rushing game going, which is something that hasn't been really their strong suit throughout the year. Everybody's known them for their passing game, but Michael Romero showed up and was like, I'm here too. Hello. So it was just a crazy game, and it really showed the versatility of Geneva's offense and defense. And it'll be really interesting to see, especially with the playoffs, to see how far they go with that versatility.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is that this was not like a fluky, they had a lot of huge big plays or whatever type thing. I mean, when you have a situation where your running back runs for almost 200 yards and you hold down their running back to about 30 yards or whatever, and the running back like Whitwell, that's been such a huge part of what Batavia does. I mean, that this was no fluke. I mean, they clearly showed that they were the better team, and man, I mean, obviously in 6A, East St. Louis is always sort of the elephant in the room, but Geneva is going to be one of those teams that we're going to be talking about, capable of making a very deep run in 6A. And I think this week that win over Batavia, I mean, that just affirmed that thought.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Steve Susie has been talking about it a lot. 6A has usually been dominated by, East St. Louis and also Cary Grove as of recently.
Air growth.
But
Yeah.
but Geneva, with a big win against a team that, made the 7A state semifinals last year and has been looking just as dominant as they were last year, getting a big win like this just shows how good they can be. And also on top of that, you kind of mentioned it, they changed up their game style. They had 57 offensive plays when in each of their first 5 games, they never had more than 45. And they didn't rely on those big plays. So they showed that everything can be really good for the future. And it's really exciting to see what will happen.
No doubt about it. So great win for Geneva last Friday. Also a great win for Downers Grove North. The game that I was at, Downers Grove North playing at York. It was another match of 5-0 teams. Downers Grove coming away with a 35-14 win. And the two things that really stood out for me in that game, number one, Downers Grove North defense. It's been great all year. It's only given up 21 points in 6 games so far. They own, 28 points in 6 games this year. And I mean, they gave up a fluky touchdown in York's first drive, kind of like a fumble. Guy picks it up, scores. Just kind of a weird type play. And then they shut down York the rest of the game until the game was well in hand. Joe Edwards, defensive lineman. There's been so many good Edwards that's come through the Downers Grove program, including David Edwards that's playing in the NFL now. But Joe Edwards, really a guy that people are going to want to keep an eye on. Defensive lineman, big, long type. I mean, he was living in the York backfield, made some really big plays. Jake Gregorio, a really good linebacker for them that also ran for 3 touchdowns. They just got a tough defense. I mean, York is a team that's really been able to run on teams all year, and they just weren't able to do it. Just really hard-nosed type defense. And on the other side, I mean, 2 things you want to be a really great championship type team is a great defense and a really good quarterback. And Downers Grove North has one of the best quarterbacks in the state. They might have the best quarterback in the state that's not named Jonas Williams, but Owen Lance was pretty darn good too. Threw for a couple touchdowns, one at the end of the first half, and then really the backbreaker end of the third quarter. Last play of the quarter, he finds Max Troa with a long, deep one down the sideline. And Owen Lance, the couple things I like about him, his release is so quick. I mean, if there's pressure, he's just getting the ball out. And the other thing that I like about him is that if he gets pressure, he gets flushed out of the pocket, he doesn't try to make plays that aren't there, try to force things into coverage. He'll just kind of chuck it to the ground, throw it away. He's just a very, he's not only a really talented quarterback. I mentioned a quick release, very strong arm. He's just a very smart quarterback. I mean, he's a kid that, you could easily see in 1 or 2 years is going to be playing for a Big Ten program, which he is going to be at Minnesota. Just really like Owen Lance as a quarterback. And again, you get a great quarterback, you get a championship level defense. I don't know if this team is as good as the team that went to state last year. They might even be better than the team that went to the state finals last year, but just a really impressive win for Downers Grove North.
Yeah, definitely. And you kind of mentioned it last week that this matchup between Downers Grove North and York was going to be, the Trojans' first true test of the season. Yeah. And
they passed big time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They basically passed it with flying colors, and it really showed how deep they are and how good they are, especially against teams that are, up there in terms of the power rankings like York. And it'll be really interesting to see how they do this week against Lions. A little sneak peek of what we're going to be covering for future games, but it'll be really interesting.
Another big one in the West Suburban Silver. And I mean, I think Downers Grove North, I know somebody had said to me on Twitter after the game, best team in 7A. I mean, I think Mount Carmel is still going to be heard from until otherwise noted. I think they need to be recognized as one of the teams to beat, if not the team to beat in 7A. But Downers Grove North is right there. I mean, they're going to be heard from. I think Batavia, I'm not going to count them out even after that loss last Friday. I still think Batavia is going to be a factor in 7A, but certainly Downers Grove North. Joel, we talked. I just talked about another big game in Elmhurst. There was another pretty big game in Elmhurst this past Friday. St. Francis, IC Catholic, really, really big time rivals. Just kind of I don't know if they like each other, but they always play great football games. And St. Francis came away with a really big win in that one, 21-13. And kind of the story in that game is I don't know if you saw, but St. Francis was without their star running back Tyron Ransom. He missed the game. He ran for over 1,300 yards last year. But Tivius Caldwell stepping up, running for over 100 yards in that game, had the big touchdown that kind of salted the game away. I mean, you mentioned like the depth of Downers Road North. How about the depth of St. Francis that a sophomore comes off the bench, and I think he ran for close to 150 yards. Really shows the depth of skill talent at St. Francis between Tivius Caldwell, Tyvon Ransom when he comes back. I mean, Brady Palmer, we've talked about as a quarterback that stepped right in as a quarterback and done a great job. They have a couple very good receivers. And then they have Gavin Mueller, the big tight end, who all he has is like 10 or 12 Division I offers. So just a lot of talent for St. Francis, and Tivius Caldwell, great game for that kid.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a really big confidence booster for St. Francis as well. Because, I mean, like we mentioned last week, this was a must-win game for both of these teams. Obviously, St. Francis had 2 straight losses heading to that game, including that heartbreaker against Providence Catholic last week. And then IC Catholic is obviously right on that fringe, or right on the fringe of, being one of those lower teams in the playoffs. But St. Francis proved that they really wanted to come out and get that confidence booster back. And, you kind of mentioned it with Tivius Caldwell, coming off the bench and, being that producer that he needed to be for the team. And it really just showed the depth of St. Francis. And it'll definitely be good to see what they can do with these next upcoming matches in the future.
Another really good win in the Chicago Catholic League last Friday. Montini comes away with a 34-16 win over Carmel. Montini, a team that's, there's just so many good teams in that CCL ESCC that sometimes they maybe get a little bit overshadowed. But we're talking about a team that last year reached the Class 3A semifinals and really gave Byron a really great game in the semifinals. They have a sophomore quarterback too, Israel Abrams, that I think people are going to want to kind of keep an eye on. He threw for 249 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's really started to come on as a playmaker, a guy that makes a lot of plays for them. They kind of really spread it around. They have a lot of different guys that they like to go to. But Israel Abrams, he's a kid that again, keep an eye on. I think he just got an offer from Iowa State. I have a feeling he's going to be getting more offers too. He's only a sophomore, but that was a really good win for Montini. Kind of honestly, I picked Carmel in that game just because Carmel, they got Trey Taylor, a great quarterback, and they're a real good team. But Montini won pretty handily. That was a very impressive win for them.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, you kind of mentioned it, the offense, or the quarterback play was really good for them. 3 touchdowns in that game. And with Montini, obviously, those back-to-back losses against Marist and Fenwick in weeks 3 and 4 might have been a little bit of a little confidence instead of booster, it lowered their confidence a little bit. But back-to-back wins against Marmion and then this week against Carmel, it's definitely going to be good for them heading into that latter half of the season. I believe they've got a pretty tough schedule coming up. They got St. Viator next week, I believe, and then they have St. Lawrence also down the line as well. So it's definitely going to be big for them to get a big win against Carmel, and it definitely boosts their playoff chances for the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of struggle to put up points in their losses against Marist and Fenwick. I think they might have scored like 9 against Marist and 10 or it wasn't that many. But the fact that they would put up 34 points last week, again, I mentioned Abrams is kind of coming on as a quarterback for them. So again, a very, very good win for them. A couple really important wins, I thought, last week that stood out to me. I'm going to start with the game on Friday night, a game that, it's funny. We get so caught up on our games and everything that's going on, kind of living our own. And then, you check Twitter every once in a while, just see what's going on. And there's always like 1 or 2 games that you're like, wow, that kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit. The game that kind of raised my eyebrows last week was Yorkville beating Minooka. Minooka is a team that came in undefeated 5-0. Yorkville, they came in 2-3. They were struggling had some trouble running the ball. They have a new offensive line this year. And Yorkville comes away with a 21-7 win. Notable in that game, they ran for over 200 yards in that game. They had negative yardage rushing in 2 of their first 5 games, and to be able to run for that many yards in a game, that's a really good sign for them. And Yorkville's a team that even last year they started 2-3, but then they won their last 4 regular season games. They're a team that I could see coming on again. They seem to get better as the season goes on, but that was a very big win for them because you get to 2-3. If they would have dropped to 2-4, well, then math is starting to take over and things are not looking so great for you. So that was a very big win for them. And then, of course, the other one I think we talked about on the podcast last week. I feel like I've talked about this team every week because they've just had kind of an up and down year. Glenbard West able to come away with a 35-14 win over Hinsdale Central. Notable in that game, Tayon Oriental, their very fine senior running back. He got hurt at the very end of the week 1 loss to Batavia. He had a hand injury. I think it was a broken hand. He told me it was, but he came back last week. He ran for 60 yards and a touchdown. He threw a 41-yard touchdown. They like to use him in different areas. I mean, he's a running back, but they like to use him as a wildcat occasionally. But so that's now their second win in a row. They're 2-4, but as Nather has taught everybody last year, 0-4 does not end the season for anybody. But they're 2-4 now. The schedule, they play York this week, so that's a tough one, but it gets a little bit more favorable the last 2 weeks of the season. At this point, I like Glenbard West's chances of getting into the playoffs either 4-5 or potentially 5-4 if they're able to beat York this week. But I'm not when a team makes the playoffs 16 years in a row under a head coach, it's wise not to give up on them after 4 weeks. And I was getting very close to giving up on them, but I think I'm back on the Hilltopper train.
Yeah, I think the return of Tayon Oriental was definitely a good reason to get back on that train. But like you mentioned, that game against York is going to be big for them as well. Because, I mean, riding that 2-game win streak, even as a team that, that hasn't had the most success this year against teams that have done really well last season, this is going to be a really big game for them. And it'll be something that, we're going to have to keep our eyes on in order to make sure that, if something big happens, we're on top of it next week.
Yeah. Any other week 6 games that kind of stood out to you before we dive into week 7?
Well, we started with the Batavia-Geneva rivalry. We had a couple of other rivalries happening in the Duquesne Conference that, kind of popped my eyes out. St. Charles North defeated St. Charles East for their 5th consecutive game. They ended up winning 42-7 thanks to 5 touchdowns from Ethan Plum. They moved up 5-1 on the season. It's very sneakily, on top of or near the top of the Duquesne Conference. And, from the way that they're looking, there's a really good chance in that week 9 matchup against Geneva. If they win, they'll potentially have a share of the Duquesne Conference. And that's going to be really interesting to watch. And then also on top of that, we had Wheaton Warrenville South defeat Wheaton North for the 2nd straight season, in a pretty dominant fashion, winning 31-6 in that game. So, a couple of interesting results happening through the Duquesne Conference. But a really good week of football overall.
Yeah, it kind of leads us into week 7, a game that I believe you're going to be at. Geneva is hosting Wheaton North. And I mean, right now it's sort of like if you're doing a stock report, Geneva's stock is going up, 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 where Wheaton North, I mean, unfortunately, after a pretty good start to the year, they've kind of had a couple of really difficult weeks. I mean, Batavia really kind of smacked them around a little bit. And then Wheaton Warrenville South beat them last week. So maybe the Falcons, you start to kind of get worried about them. But I've kind of learned in the Duquesne Conference that just when you think you got things figured out, you don't have things figured out. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen. What do you think about that matchup as you go into it?
It's definitely going to be really interesting to watch. I mean, Wheaton North Wheaton North defeated Geneva last year. That was their 2nd loss that the Vikings suffered last season. And it was in a pretty, heartbreaking fashion, I believe. I think they scored the game-winning touchdown in the 4th quarter to go up by 1, I believe. And that basically secured it for Wheaton North. So, like you mentioned, anything is possible in Duquesne Conference, but but Geneva is just on the highest of highs right now, and Wheaton North, I'm sure, is on the lowest of lows and wants to turn that around as quickly as they can. So it'll be really interesting to see how they respond after 2 straight weeks of um, getting relatively thrown out.
Yeah, that's going to be a game that I mean you're going to be there, so I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on. But that's going to be a game that I'm keeping an eye on Friday. Is that Geneva Wheaton North game? Another matchup in the West Suburban Silver that you mentioned a few minutes ago. That's a big one of the biggest ones in the area. Is Downers Go North playing Lions Township. Both those teams 6-0. Downers Go North, if I'm not mistaken, is 6-0 for the first time since 2003, which is it's many moons ago. So. Um, should be a fun one. I mean, I really like Downers Go North, the way they're playing with their defense, the way Owen Lansу is coming together as a very good quarterback. But Lions Township, I mean, they got a really good defense. They're pretty physical. I like their quarterback, Don Pitt. I'm going to butcher his name. I'm just going to say Don Pisciotti and hope that I pronounce it correctly. He's been really good as a first-year starter. And Travis Stam, Illinois State recruited receiver, one of the best receivers around. Lions Township, they're gonna have to really open it up and really get the ball to Travis and kind of spread the ball around because that Downers Grove North defense is tough. If you think that you're gonna go into a game and hey, we're just gonna run the ball 30 times and that's the way we're gonna win, well, you're gonna go away very disappointed because their defense is that good. I like Downers Grove North in this game, but I'm just very interested to see because Downers Grove North has already played York, where Lions Township has not played Downers Grove North or York. So I think I have a little bit more data on Downers Grove North than I do on Lions Township. So I think I'm going to learn a little bit more about Lions this week. I already know a little bit more about Downers Grove North, but yeah, that should be a fun one Friday night at Downers Grove.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Lions has, kind of been one of those teams that, even though they are 6-0, they've picked up their offense a whole lot throughout the latter half, or as the season has gone on. I mean, they had close wins against Wheat Mortonville South and Hinsdale Central in the first 2 weeks that were decided by one score. And then these past 2 weeks, a 59-0 win against Provicio West, and then a 49-14 win last week against Oak Park. I mean, it seemed like one of those things where it's like, as the season's gone along, their offense has been a little bit more potent to getting into the end zone. But against a relatively powerhouse team like Downers Grove North, it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that offensive momentum rolling.
Yeah. Another game Friday, the game that I'm going to be at, Oswego, which is 6-0, playing at Yorkville. Again, I alluded to a few minutes ago, they're coming off of a really good win over Minooka. Oswego 6-0, but they played some pretty close to the vest, tough games the last 2 weeks against Plainfield North and Bolingbrook. The game just kind of hung around, and then they were finally able to come away with a win. So, I mean, I'd like their defense a lot. Their defense has been great all year. I think their offense is going to need to kind of step it up a little bit because Yorkville, I know Oswego probably comes in its favor, but Yorkville has really had their number the last couple of years, including last year. And I talked to Yorkville, Luke Zook, who's a really good senior safety and running back, and they kind of feel they feel a little sneaky confident about this game. They know they've beaten Oswego the last 2 years, so they bring that confidence to that game. Obviously, it's a big game for Oswego. They want to stay undefeated. They're going towards their first conference title in I believe 5. It's been a few years, maybe 3 or 4 years since they won conference. On the other side, Yorkville, I mean, they're 3-3. They're in a little bit better shape than they were at this time, but they're still 3-3. There's still a lot of work to do. That's going to be a really good game, a big game, and I'd be very surprised if it's not a low-scoring game because both of those programs, both those teams hang their hat on defense. Should be a fun one. Looking forward to that one.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it. We expect it to be a low scoring game. I mean, the past couple of games for Oswego has been relatively low scoring. I mean, after that Joliet Central game, I mean, they've only had 21 and 22 points in their last 2 wins. But no, I really expect this to be a really interesting game, especially with Yorkville already defeated one undefeated team so far this season, and hopefully looking to get another one off with the Panthers. So it'll be interesting to see if they can pull it off again.
Yeah. What other games are you looking at this week that Friday night when you're at Geneva, you're going to be keeping an eye on?
I've got two in the back of my mind that I was like, this will be really interesting to watch. The first one, it's going to be another CCL ESCC game. It's going to be Marmion and IC Catholic. That game is going to be coming up on Friday night. That one's going to be really interesting. Marmion, of course, is 4-2 on the season in their first season under Adam Guerra, and IC Catholic is looking to get anything going or for the most part, especially after that 2-4 start to the season. So I think it'll be really interesting. Marmion, if they get this win, it makes the path to the playoffs a lot easier for them. They've got a couple of tough matchups in the next coming weeks. So so this will be a really big confidence booster for them, and it will hopefully get them in a better shot to make the playoffs. Meanwhile, IC Catholic needs this win in order to get that chance in the future. And the other one that I think will be really interesting is going to be Kalen and Rochelle actually out west a little bit. So Kalen is started off the season 4-0. They're 4-2 now, after two pretty big losses to Morris and Sycamore over the past 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Rochelle is 5-1 and is coming off of a big win against Morris, who beat Kalen 50-10. So Rochelle's kind of riding that high right now and has gotten themselves into the conversation of potentially being on the top of that Interstate 8. So it'll be really interesting to see how these two teams match up this week.
Yeah, Rochelle, that was another one of those eye-opening wins last week. They really took it to Morris pretty good and really show that they're going to be a team to watch out for in whatever bracket they end up with. But you mentioned IC Catholic. I mean, they're a program that it hasn't been a matter of are they going to get to the playoffs the last several years. It's going to be a matter of just how deep they are and can they start booking the reservations for wherever the state championships are, because they've been such a regular there. But, man, they're sitting right now at 2-4. They still got to play St. Rita. They still got St. Viator. I mean, this is about as close of a must-win game, them going to Marmion, as you possibly can get. IC Catholic playing Marmion. I mean, Marmion's 4-2. So they're probably feeling pretty good. They still got Leo left, which is in all likelihood a win. So pretty good chance for the playoffs for Marmion. So, Marmion can kind of be that team that says, IC Catholic, you're not going to the playoffs this year, this week. I'm sure they like to do that because IC has been, one of those, top level programs for a number of years. But another game in the CCL I'm really keeping an eye on is Bennett is hosting Fenwick. Both of those teams kind of sneaky, quietly coming along at 5-1. I mean, Fenwick is a team that they're about a minute away from being undefeated against a close loss against Joliet Catholic. Bennett's only loss, came to Mount Carmel. So it's going to be a fun one. It's pretty good players, good quarterback. Bennett's got a good one. Fenwick's got a good one as well. So that's another one that I'm, just kind of seeing, like, I like both of those teams, and let's just see if I like one of them just a little bit more out of this week. So yeah, a lot of great stuff going into Friday.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you alluded to it. Fenwick just a minute off from basically being 6-0. They've looked really good in their wins throughout the season. I mean, grinding out a victory against Montini Catholic a couple of weeks ago, and then handing it to St. Lawrence last week in 37-15 win. So, both these teams have a lot of momentum heading into this game, and it should definitely be an interesting one to look at.
Should be a lot of fun. Weather's getting a little bit colder. I was very stupidly wore shorts till last Friday's game, and I was really regretting it around 9:30 at night. So the weather's getting a little bit colder. Games are getting a little bit more important as we get late in the year. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. I'm going to be back here tomorrow with Steve Susie looking ahead to week 7 around the state. And then Steve and Matt Roto will be back on Friday night for the live stream from 9:30 to 11. Of course, Joel and I will be on the sidelines, probably bundled up a little bit more than I was last Friday. So again, thanks everybody for joining us. Western Suburbs Podcast. For Joel Boenitz, I'm Josh Welge. Have a great Tuesday afternoon.